For all its firepower, for all its threats, and for all the global headlines it commands, the United States of America still couldn't bring Iran to its heels. Even with bunker busters, airstrikes, and backing of its allies and Israel, Trump failed to break Tehran's will. The Islamic Republic didn't fold. It fired back. So how did one of the most heavily sanctioned nations stand tall against a superpower's roar? And what's the inside story of the ceasefire between Israel and Iran? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. It's now being called the 12-day war. Between June 13th and 24th, West Asia plunged into chaos. Israel bombed Iranian cities, nuclear sites, and command centers. Iran responded by raining missiles on Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Then the US jumped in, claiming it dealt a devastating blow to Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Yet, Iran struck back, boldly, directly, and publicly. If Washington brought its biggest guns to scare Tehran, why did the Islamic Republic keep firing? In a region already soaked in tension, June 2025 detonated a new kind of war. Israel's warplanes lit up Iranian skies, hitting cities as deep as Mashhad. Not content with attacking military installations, Israeli bombs tore through oil depots and government compounds. The devastation was real. Civilian neighborhoods reduced to rubble, bodies pulled from collapsed mosques and apartments. Iran didn't flinch. Instead, it retaliated with hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones, hammering Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem. Civilian casualties mounted, emergency services scrambled, air raid sirens became the soundtrack of summer in Israel. And then came the United States of America, Trump's America. True to form, didn't bother with warnings or red lines. It dove headfirst into the firestorm. US bombers hit Iranian nuclear sites at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. Trump proclaimed massive destruction, tweeting that America had obliterated Iran's nuclear capability. But as smoke cleared, it became evident that Tehran wasn't panicking. It was calculating. Iranian officials swiftly discredited the attack's impact. They revealed that Fordo had been evacuated long ago. A key advisor, Mehdi Mohammadi, scoffed, and I quote, "You cannot bomb knowledge. In other words, blow up a lab and we'll just rebuild it. The nuclear know-how is in our scientists' heads, not in your crosshairs."
Intercepting our missiles and to not allow our missiles to reach to Israel. Of course, despite of this, our missile targeted different facilities and different infrastructure of Israel. Anyway, we were expecting such this, and we were ready. You know, first of all, Iranian nuclear facilities are peaceful, and where all Iranian nuclear activity, nuclear facilities were under subject to the intensive inspection of the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency. So, but at the same time, they claim they claim that it's not peaceful, and they launched such this. You know. Still, the Iranian concerning structure are studying the extent of damages to the infrastructures. I am not at the position to say what happened and how is the situation now. I am still, you know, it's something that needs a high-ranking decision. It's strategic. It needs a strategic decision and a strategic position for next step. Right. You know, we have proved that we are serious regarding defending our national interest, our sovereignty, our people. And, you know, if you review the history of the world after World War II, No country has targeted any US military or US installation, US facilities. It was Iran, just Iran and just Iran that twice has targeted US military forces, military bases. And, you can count it as symbolic or serious, but Iran was enough brave to respond to the military action of to the aggression of United States. And still, if United States can repeat its unlawful manner, it will receive the same response. First of all, as I mentioned, no aggression could happen without support of US. And Trump tries to show that he has played an important role in war and in ceasefire. But, intentionally, our military operation was in response to responding to the aggression of Israel. If Israel stop, you can call it ceasefire or whatever you want. If it stop, we will stop our operation against Israel. But you can count it as ceasefire or other thing.
The ambiguity became a weapon in itself. It sowed doubt about American effectiveness. While Trump boasted of obliteration, Iran stood up, dusted itself off, and declared its hands are freed. Then it aimed at Udeid. On June 23rd, Iran launched ballistic missiles at Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the crown jewel of America's military presence in the region. Tehran struck not some proxy or hidden target, but the very base from which US intercepts missiles of Iran that are headed towards Israel. Qatari officials claimed their defenses intercepted the missiles, reporting no casualties. But that wasn't the point. The message from Iran was crystal clear. We can reach you. We are not afraid. We are not done playing defense. The strike on Udeid broke a long-held taboo. It wasn't just a military maneuver. It was a psychological warfare, a gut punch to American dominance. Tehran had crossed a line, and Washington had no easy answer. Iran's resolve wasn't born of confidence. It was born of desperation. Under years of crushing sanctions, inflation rampant, its currency collapsing, and its regional alliances under pressure, Tehran had one card left: survival at all costs. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi called Israel's first airstrikes an act of war. The regime, already teetering economically, couldn't afford to appear weak. Backing down wasn't an option. It was existential suicide, so Iran escalated instead.
Of course, the door for diplomacy should be always keep open, but this is not the case right now. My country has been under attack, under aggression, and we have to respond based on our legitimate right of self-defense. And we will do that as long as needed and necessary.
By June 24th, Tehran issued a brutal ultimatum. Israel must stop all strikes by 4 a.m. local time or face consequences. The deadline passed. More missiles launched. The regime's calculus was simple: retaliation or ruin. And they chose retaliation. Trump's doctrine assumed Iran would be too scared, too poor, and too isolated to fight back. That logic collapsed. His move from diplomacy to airstrikes in a matter of hours revealed strategic incoherence. 1 minute, he was dangling negotiations. The next, he was ordering bomb runs. That wasn't strength, it was volatility. And in Tehran, it read as bluff and bluster. Even Israel's psychological tactics failed. Israeli officials sent warnings to Iranian counterparts to escape in 12 hours. But Iran's leadership didn't run, they braced. That resilience shook the assumptions underpinning US-Israeli pressure. Caught in the middle was Qatar, host to the US Udeid Air Base. but also a diplomatic middleman and energy titan. Iran's strike on Al-Udeid exposed Qatar's fragility. Tehran had made its stance quite clear. Doha's alliance with Washington had made it a fair target, but only in places where there were American bases. Qatar, according to Iran, is an ally, a friendly country, and therefore they were not going to target Qatar and the civilians in Qatar. The risks to Qatar weren't just military, they were economic and existential though. With LNG exports comprising a huge share of Qatar's GDP, any conflict threatening its infrastructure or its shared north field with Iran could cripple its economy. Already, Qatar Energy has scrambled to assess fallout with international partners like ExxonMobil and Shell. And though exports haven't been halted yet, the storm clouds are undeniable. One wrong strike, one misstep in the Strait of Hormuz, and Qatar's entire economic model could unravel. What happens in the Persian Gulf doesn't stay in the Persian Gulf. With the conflict at full tilt, oil and gas markets have gone haywire. Iran's hint at closing the Strait of Hormuz, a channel that carries 20% of the world's oil, has traders in panic mode. Memories of Ukraine war's impact on energy prices haunt global markets. Strikes on oil infrastructure have already reduced output. Even rumors of further attacks have driven prices sky high. For countries dependent on imports, India, Japan, European nations, the shock is immediate.
The escalation of tensions in the Middle East was not entirely unexpected. In fact, we had foreshadowed this escalation, and the government under the Honorable Prime Minister has been consistently and periodically reviewing the situation, including the possibility of the closure of the Straits of Hormuz. We had diversified the sources of supply, and out of the 5.5 million barrels of crude oil that India consumes daily, about 1.5 and 2 million only come through the Straits of Hormuz. We import roughly 4 million barrels through other routes, and our companies, the oil marketing companies, have enough stocks. Most of them have stocks up to 3 weeks. One of them has in fact 25 days stocks. And we are also confident that we can increase the supply of crude through other routes should the situation so warrant. The Honorable Prime Minister has already spoken with all the major leaders. He's had a long conversation with the President of Iran also, and calling for de-escalation. It is our hope, and all of us are expecting that the situation will result in calm and de-escalation rather than further escalation. But meanwhile, we continue to be prepared to meet the evolving situation.
Qatar, as the LNG kingpin, is facing cascading challenges. A disruption in its north field, whether by attack or blockade, would knock out nearly a fifth of global LNG supply. And that's not speculation. Qatar Energy is already holding emergency talks with global partners, preparing for worst-case scenarios. While Qatar has foreign reserves to cushion the blow, the financial stability it's known for is starting to wobble. Prolonged instability means slower diversification, nervous investors, and soaring insurance and shipping costs. LNG tankers rerouting or being delayed isn't just a business hiccup, it's a crisis. And to that public fear, airspace closures and a spike in military activity, and you get a fragile equilibrium spiraling toward disorder. On the diplomatic front, Qatar's identity as a neutral mediator is eroding fast. Its US alliance on one hand and ties to Hamas and Iran on the other make it a contradiction, one that may soon explode into geopolitical irrelevance.
Let me first state that Doha is basically in Qatar is basically the Pakistan of the Middle East. That's the double game that they're playing. So we have to understand that there is a close working relationship between the Islamic Republic and Qatar. This, for me, this is the Khamenei plea. It's another attempt to say we're giving you an off-ramp here, America, when it's really Khamenei that all he had to do was stop enriching and stop reprocessing. He refused to do that, and this is the response. Qatar's in a difficult situation because 70% of their GDP, up to 70%, comes from the South Power's oil, petroleum field or gas field, which they share with the Islamic Republic. So they're in a little bit of a bind. I've always questioned why we've had a base in Qatar, because they are not friendly. They are, as I said, they're Pakistan 2.0. And I've always maintained that the reason they're allowed there is because Khamenei wants us there. He is so that, one, he can spy on us, watch us, see ship movements, and two, it gives him a right target. So anything from Qatar saying this is an off-ramp, they're going to condemn it. That's for their audience. But who's Khamenei's audience at this point? It's dwindling. In the region, it's dwindling, and then in the country, we don't get reports, but you got to think it's falling apart. At least layers have been removed, and you got to expect that there's going to be layers that are they've had enough of this. They're just waiting for the right time to rise up.
Washington bet big. It gambled that firepower would equal fear, that a shock and awe campaign would neuter Iran's ambitions and break its will. It failed. Not because the weapons weren't powerful, but because the target was determined. Iran framed the conflict not as a skirmish, but as survival. It played the long game, downplaying US damage, retaliating at high-value targets, and controlling psychological narrative. And now, with West Asia teetering on the edge and global oil markets on fire, Washington's course of strategy looks not only ineffective, it looks reckless. The US came in swinging, confident that might equals submission. But Iran flipped the script. By treating every missile as a message, every attack as existential, and every diplomatic slight as proof of war, Tehran didn't just survive the world's most powerful military, it stared it down. With the region inflamed and the global economy hanging in the balance, the question is no longer whether Iran can be intimidated, it's whether the bully knows when to back off. Thank you for watching Statecraft.